Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. 4 Native women were just elected to the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians Tribal Council. Their election represents a milestone for a council that currently has all male members. It also marks a trend in Native female leaders and candidates in local and national elections. Today we'll hear perspectives on what's behind the trend and how it might shape policy decisions in the months and years ahead. You can join our discussion about Native women leaders coming up after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Antonia Gonzalez. While dozens of tribal colleges and universities, or TCUs, are facing funding cuts that could shut them down, a new report highlights some of the economic impacts generated from tens of thousands of alumni. It's meant to show the positive return on investments for students, taxpayers, and society. KJZZ's Gabriel Pietrorazio has details.
The study was commissioned by the nonprofit American Indian Higher Education Consortium. It found that over 40,000 former students added nearly $4 billion to the U.S. economy between 2022 and 2023. That data was gathered from the 35 higher education institutions.
The TCUs are a direct expression of sovereignty over our education systems that drive job creation in our local economies, that are land and community based, and that are also grounded in Native culture and traditions.
Anna Wake Rose is Cherokee and the nonprofit's president and CEO. Democratic Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury, whose state is home to 3 TCUs, is hopeful for stable Biden-era funding.
As we're headed into the last 2 weeks before the end of the fiscal year, the White House and Republicans have yet to produce a viable budget. So we anticipate that the cuts that were proposed in Trump's budget are not going to go through because of the continuing resolution.
I'm Gabriel Pietrorazio.
The U.S. Department of Agriculture announced this summer that it plans to reorganize the agency. One of the largest Alaska Native advocacy organizations says that change could harm tribal food security programs. The Alaska Desk's Ayolna Naiden reports.
The U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, announced in July a plan to reorganize the department, citing the need to decrease spending and bureaucracy. That plan is not final, but the current proposal includes consolidation of tribal relations programs and personnel, according to the memorandum of the decision. But leaders of the First Alaskans Institute say that could diminish tribal voices and harm regional agriculture and food security. Last month, the nonprofit submitted a comment to USDA about the plan, asking the agency to consult with tribes. Apahguruk Roy Agloin is the president of the First Alaskans Institute.
Food security for Native communities, it's not just a policy issue. It's really a matter of survival, cultural continuity, and self-determination.
The USDA Office of Tribal Relations was created in 2010 after tribal farmers argued in court that the department discriminated against them. Tikan Galbraith is the chief operating officer of First Alaskans Institute. He says that the USDA's reorganization plan might move the Office of Tribal Relations from the higher-up secretarial level of the department. He says the change could diminish tribal access to USDA programs. Galbraith says that access to USDA programs is especially important in light of the changing environment.
The change in the migratory patterns and the decline for many of the species has raised the question for a lot of our communities of how do we continue to provide protein security for our tribal members.
USDA did not respond to the comment the First Alaskans Institute submitted last month. However, the department did respond to a request for comment from KNBA, calling the proposal plan a first step to, quote, right-size USDA's footprint, end quote. It added that the agency's critical functions would not be affected. In Anchorage, I am Alona Naiden.
And I'm Antonia Gonzalez.
National Native News is produced by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Support by AARP. AARP creates and connects people to unique tools and programs, helps conserve personal resources, and tackles issues that matter most to individuals, families, and communities. More at aarp.org.
Support by Sonosky Chambers Law, championing tribal sovereignty and Native American rights since 1976. From opioids litigation to treaty rights to tribal self-governance. With offices in Washington, D.C., New Mexico, California, and Alaska. Sonosky Chambers Law.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. The editor of the tribal newspaper, the Cherokee One Feather, calls the election of 4 women to the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians Tribal Council historic. They'll dramatically change female representation on the panel of 12 members that is currently all men. Their election is part of an increasing number of women in elected leadership across the country, including a few firsts. The Seminole Tribe of Oklahoma now has women in the top 2 executive tribal offices for the first time in history. A 2023 Pew Research survey finds almost half of those asked believe women will face gender discrimination in office. Well over half believe women have to do more than men to prove themselves as elected leaders. We'll hear from Native women elected leaders today to get their perspectives. And of course, listeners can join the conversation as well. Just call in at 1-800-996-2848. That number is also 1-800-99-NATIVE. We've got the phone lines open now, and our producers are waiting for your call. Joining us now from the Flathead Reservation in Montana is Shelley Fayant. She is a member of Montana's House of Representatives and a former chairwoman of the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. She is Bitterroot Salish. Representative Fayant, good morning and welcome back to Native America Calling.
Good morning.
Joining us from To'Hajiilee, New Mexico is Michelle Abeyta. She is a member of the New Mexico House of Representatives. She is Dene. Good morning, Representative Abeyta, and welcome to you as well.
Oh, yes. Hey, good morning. Glad to be here.
Joining us from Cherokee, North Carolina is Chanel Feather. She is a councilwoman-elect for the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. She is an Eastern Band citizen. Chanel, welcome to Native America Calling, and congratulations on your election.
Shio, happy to be here. Happy to be here today.
Good to have you. Also joining us from Cherokee, North Carolina is Shannon Swimmer. She is also a councilwoman-elect for the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, and of course, she's also an Eastern Band citizen. Shannon, welcome to you as well, and congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, let's go ahead and get this conversation started. And Representative Fayant, I want to begin with you. This is interesting because you have been chairwoman of your tribe, and now you are in the Montana State Legislature. What can you accomplish as a state lawmaker that you couldn't accomplish as a tribal chair?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I guess serving on the tribal council, you know, our main priority was tribal sovereignty and protecting that. That is something that we are trying to accomplish at the state level, is that recognition of sovereignty, because it's not really well understood in the body of the House of Representatives, which is made up of 100 people across the state of Montana. And a prime example of that is towards the end of our 90-day session, Senator Susan Weber of the Blackfeet Nation brought forward a bill to, I guess, put in code tribal consultation, and it passed through the Senate committees. And when it came to the House State Administration Committee, it did not pass that committee. So that is one of our priorities going forward in the interim, is to get that in the Montana State Code.
Okay, now you just experienced your first legislative session earlier this year. I'm curious to know, did you have to spend a lot of time educating your fellow legislators about some of these sovereignty issues? And just what was the overall experience? Is it what you expected it would be?
I went in, looking back on it, I went in naively thinking that there would be a lot of bipartisan work across the aisle, and that didn't happen. 2 years ago in the 23 session, there was a Republican supermajority, so the Democrats had a hard time getting anything passed. In the 25 session, we elected 11 more Democrats, so we had 42 in the House. And we have the largest American Indian caucus of any state with 12, 4 in the Senate and 8 in the House. So we are a force to be respected. And, but yes, I did spend a lot of time educating the non-members in my committees and I guess the body as a whole. I thought I would kind of take a back seat and listen and learn the process and the people, and immediately I had to play defense when there was some false statements made about the CSKT Water Compact and how it affected state lands. So from then on, I felt like I was playing defense.
Okay, now, as you mentioned, you're part of a large cohort of other Indigenous legislators, especially Indigenous women in the Montana State House. Can you point to anything, any trends or any attitudes that you think are fueling so many Native women there in Montana running for office and winning?
Yes, I think it's kind of recognize that we need to be at the table or we might be on the menu. And, that's true in any political body. That was my experience on council where, in the past when there was primarily men on council, it was easy to deal with land, forestry, water issues, and family or social issues kind of took a back seat. At one point, we had 5 women and 5 men on our council, and we did take on some of those issues like missing and murdered Indigenous relatives, some of the health and social issues. So it definitely does change the dynamic when there are women in the room and at the table, and especially Native women, because we know our role with those traditional responsibilities of taking care of the home.
Seated at the table or listed on the menu, Representative Fayette, those are strong words there. What initially drew you to public service?
I guess my parents, set that example for me. They were always big in the community, doing volunteer work. And that's just how I grew up was, being a big part of the community because of my children and now my grandchildren. And I actually have 2 great-granddaughters now. So it's just, I guess, what I was destined to do.
Mm-hmm. What's it been like having to broaden your constituency? Obviously, as a tribal chair, all of your constituents were tribal members, Native people. Now here you are in the state legislature. You have perhaps some non-Native people as well that you need to represent. How do you go about pivoting in that regard, in drawing from a larger group of people, perhaps Native or non-Native?
So myself, I'm of mixed heritage. My dad was Bidart Salish, and my mom can trace her heritage to 7 different European countries. So I really brought that out whenever I introduced myself because I didn't want to be pigeonholed into that, she's only going to represent tribal people. And, when it comes down to it, when you're out there knocking doors and asking people what their concerns are, you will find more commonalities than differences. bottom line.
Well, here we are. It's fall 2025. What are the really pressing topics right now that you're working on? What do you anticipate working on in the future? And just what are your overall goals for your term, or your first term in the Montana State Legislature?
Well, as I mentioned, during the interim, we serve on interim committees, and one of my interim committees is State Tribal Relations. So we are going to visit the reservations in Montana. We're undecided right now if we're going to visit 4 or 8 tribes, depending on the budget allocated to our committee. But we will go around and ask them what their concerns are, as well as ask them what tribal consultation looks like to them, because we have a very diverse tribal makeup within the state of Montana. So that's one of my priorities during the interim. The other interim committee I serve on is education, and we did not have a member of the Montana American Indian Caucus on the education committee during this session. So I was placed on that committee during the interim, and we're actually studying school safety. That was the study bill that we were assigned. So school safety as far as, violence or harassment, but it also includes facility concerns like, lead pipes or, unsafe drinking water. Just, a lot of our schools are in a state of disrepair. So that's a big concern for that committee. But overall, I think all of Montana is concerned about the affordability of housing, food. Food security is a big issue. We passed an ICWA bill, Montana ICWA bill last session, and we got Medicaid expansion across the table. So, just basic social issues throughout the state that, everyone can relate to. It's not just tribal or not just non-tribal.
Montana State Representative Shelley Fayant kicking off our conversation here today on Native America Calling. We're talking about Native women serving in elected leadership positions. Phone lines are open if you'd like to join us. 1-800-996-2848. 1-800-99-NATIVE. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Tribal officials and environmental organizations are pushing back on a series of radioactive gas releases by the Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico. Despite assurances from lab officials, nearby residents worry about the potential for long-term health effects. We'll hear about that and other environmental concerns coming up on the next Native America Calling.
My name is Tammy, and I'm a member of the Little Traverse Bay Band of Odawa Indians. Smoking gave me heart disease. I used to think of cigarette smoking as something that only affected me. Then at just 44 years old, I had to look into my mom's eyes on the way into emergency heart surgery and tell her, "Mommy, I promise I won't make you bury me." My tip is, think about the people in your life who love you. They go through the pain too, maybe even more than you do.
The people you love are worth quitting for. You can quit. For free help, call 1-800-QUIT-NOW. A message from the CDC.
Thanks for tuning in to Native America Calling. Today we're hearing from Native women elected to office about issues that drive their leadership and how they might influence policy that impacts their constituents and communities. You can join this conversation. Give us a call. The number is 1-800-996-2848. We've got the phone lines open. 1-800-99-NATIVE. Michelle Abeyta is a member of the New Mexico House of Representatives. She joins us now from To'Hajiilee, New Mexico. And Representative Abeyta, we just heard from Representative Fayant in Montana, and you also just served in your first state legislative session. What's been your experience so far?
Thank you. My experience in the New Mexico state legislature has been anything but what I thought it would be. I have had a tremendous amount of support from leadership and also our caucus as well. And coming in and finding the mentors I needed has been paramount to me passing the legislation that was needed to help my constituents in my district. So it's something I absolutely love, and I've thoroughly enjoyed my freshman year.
Now, Representative Ubeda, New Mexico has a women majority legislature. I'm curious to know, does that add to policy discussions or agendas? How does that influence events up there in Santa Fe?
Oh, I think it definitely strengthens the input and the conversations that are had at the table. You have a variety of experiences, lived experiences from women from all over the state. And we're coming to the table looking at meaningful solutions that we know are going to impact everyday families and how exactly it's going to impact those families.
Now, there are other new members in the New Mexico House, both in the House of Representatives and the Senate. What do you think is driving the trend of just so many new people being elected to office there in New Mexico?
What's driving the trend for women running? Is that what you had said?
Women, and then just in general, I know there are quite a few new members there in the House and in the Senate in New Mexico.
Right. Well, I think one is that we just want to make sure that our community and our constituents have the best representation up there. And that's why I ran. I advocated for an early childhood program that was dire in my community. And as you know, in rural communities, especially tribal communities, those childhood programs are necessary for early love of learning and social development skills of our children. And when my requests were ignored and denied, I thought, you know what, I'm going to get in there and help my community. And as I got in there, I seen so many other communities that had more requests and needed more resources.
Representative Ubeda, you are an attorney, a lawyer. Tell us more about your background and how that enhances your abilities and your knowledge and your overall competence as a state legislator.
Sure. Well, I want to give a quick shout out to the University of New Mexico. My husband and I received our undergrad there. My husband received his law degree there. A huge shout out to the Native American Studies program out there. I received my law degree at the University of Arizona with the Indigenous Peoples Law and Policy program. I absolutely loved that experience. And I was headed into a direction for environmental law. After law school, I worked for the Navajo Nation Department of Justice, which helped me build on my relationships with the federal government and how we're managing lands with other tribes as well. And shortly after, I transitioned out and started a solo private practice for family law because that is so needed in our Navajo communities. So I practice all across the Navajo Nation. I handle children's cases for elderly people, and then everyday cases for civil family matters. One of the huge caseloads I have is domestic violence. So, of course, seeing that side of what my constituents and my tribal members are facing has really helped shape the perspective of what our communities need at the state level.
And in New Mexico, being in the state legislature, I mean, this is basically a part-time job for you. You still have your full-time career as an attorney. How are you able to balance both? I imagine you've got a really, really heavy schedule.
Absolutely. So again, I thank my husband for having the type of career he has to support and sustain a family of 6, because the New Mexico legislator is actually an unpaid legislator. So all of the work we do is unpaid. We're out there attending interim, we're in session, we're traveling our district, meeting with constituents. I mean, one thing that has helped tremendously is the fact that we've recently hired legislative district aides who are compensated. And they've really helped with navigating our schedule, streamlining constituent needs and requests, and supporting us in doing all types of research or getting answers and help for our people. But yes, it definitely is a balance, but I think Native women have done that for centuries, and we're very good at it. And it's just, we do what we need to do to get the job done.
Well, let's talk more about your district, because New Mexico, like Montana, is a very large state geographically, and your district covers a very large geographical area. What does it take to meet the needs of a diverse district, and again, just having to travel so many miles to these different communities that you represent?
Absolutely. I think the two things that come to mind is adaptability and then open minds. As you had mentioned, my district is very huge. I cover 6 counties. I cover 9 Navajo chapters, 3 pueblos, half of the city of Grants, a ton of smaller villages, with about 30,000 residents. So it's very large. To get from one side to the other, it's about 200 plus miles. I have Interstate I-40 and Interstate I-25 that both go through my district. So I have to use a variety of media, everything from in-person meetings to Zoom, text messaging, phone calls, mailers. I'm using whatever I can to reach my constituents and then make sure that their voices are heard, and I'm also listening to what they need.
Now, what you mentioned, you have Pueblo communities in your district. You also have Navajo communities in your district, and sometimes different tribes, they have competing interests. They don't always align on the same issues in the same direction. What's that like, having to balance the priorities and the needs of two very different tribal groups, Pueblos and Navajos?
I will say that it's been needed to unify the interests, to bring them to the table to talk. And for so long, we have not had adequate representation. We've had someone who is able to just keep us separate. I, on the other hand, have shifted that narrative and taken action a little bit differently. I bring them to the table, talk about both interests, even to our non-Native communities, and talk about how so many of the things we want are very similar, and talking about how our value systems are also very similar and how it's time to unite on certain issues. We also agree that we won't agree on everything, which has helped tremendously, but every tribal community has its own government structure as well, as you know. So in addition to my 2-year term, other communities have 2-year terms and 4-year terms. So it takes a lot of education, communication, and relationship building, but it's possible and it's working here in our district.
Now, I imagine when you're out working with your Navajo constituents, you hit some fairs, you hit some rodeos, and then when you go to Pueblo country, you hit a lot of feast days. Tell us more about what that's like.
I absolutely love it. I think right when I entered the race last spring, I had hit Laguna Feast out in March. And I remember a constituent coming up to me and saying, "Hey, I received your text message. You look exactly like your picture." And I thought that was great because sometimes our constituents don't recognize us immediately when we're just stepping in. But I love the relationships that I've been building. Prior to running, I had lots of connections, family, friends, people I went to school with, grew up with, or knew through mutual friends. So it wasn't too hard to build those relationships. But now being an elected, we've added so many more relationships to the table. And I absolutely love it. I love going into my communities.
The phone number is 1-800-996-2848. Once again, that is 1-800-996-2848. You can join this discussion. You might be listening right now. Maybe you are a person who has been an elected leader for your tribe, a Native woman who has served in a leadership role. I'd like to hear from you. What did you learn? What was your experience like? What would you like to talk with our guest today about? 1-800-99-NATIVE. Give us a call. Join this conversation. Let's now move east to Cherokee, North Carolina, where we have 2 EBCI councilwomen-elects on the line, Chanel Feather and Shannon Swimmer. And Chanel, I want to begin with you. Of course, you and 3 other women, Shannon among them, newly elected council members. Can you draw any conclusions about why so many women got picked for office this year?
Oh, great question, Sean. My speculation has to be with the lack of representation in the last term. So this last term, there were no women that were on council. And this was the first time since 1965 that there was no female representation. And that, for me, was one of the biggest reasons why I decided to put my name in the hat.
Well, tell us a little bit more. I'm familiar with EBCI Tribal Council. I know it's tough to get elected, and it's especially tough to get elected running a campaign for the very first time. Chanel, you just went out there. This was your first campaign. You won it. Here you are, councilwoman-elect. What did it take? How do you think you were able to galvanize so many votes and win your community, the Yellow Hill community, which is a large community there in Cherokee?
Yes, so I am from the Feather family, and we originate from the Yellow Hill community. Right on top of Rattlesnake Mountain is where my great-grandfather family originated from. And for me, I grew up here, and I ended up growing up on top of Soko Mountain, which is a different community. And I moved away. I got my degree in biology, and I lived off of the boundary for a number of years. And during that time, I also stayed very connected by listening to the council sessions, by making sure that I'm up to date with my grandparents, my parents, and my sisters, their experiences here on the boundary and what's going on, and making sure that I'm looking at the newspaper, right? And during that time, I really wanted to make an impact and come home after my experience off the boundary. And so about 5 years ago, I moved home, and my biggest thing was making sure that I am present and being in community. That kinship, those kinship ties are so strong and so important and amazing and unique and beautiful in Indigenous communities. And so for the last 5 years, I've really been making sure that I am out in the community volunteering. I coached basketball, little 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, and I also coach elders, 50s, 60s, 70s, and senior games. And that has been such a joy to be able to learn about those different generations that are in our community and how to serve them better. So going out and knocking on doors and visiting with relatives the last few months have been really, really amazing. And my community is so beautiful, so strong, and there needs to be representation, especially for women, because we are traditionally matrilineal.
Chanel, you also maintain a strong following on social media, and you have for a number of years. How big a factor do you think your social media presence was, in addition to the in-person outreach that you've done?
Oh, I think it's a huge piece to the puzzle here. I'm an elder millennial, and I think that is the piece, especially here in the community, where is missing. It's the transparency and the communication piece. There are a lot of services that our community members aren't aware of because the lack of technology that is being utilized. We just started getting on internet to upload papers, to fill out forms. The processes are just a little bit behind, and I think that opens up a whole new accessibility for enrolled members to be able to know, how do I get these services? Where can I go? And just being able to communicate across the board. I've noticed that it's an obstacle here. We're in rural mountains, North Carolina. The internet is really, really hard to get to in some of these places. And so being able to have that aspect and be able to be present on all platforms, I think has really connected generations.
Thank you, Chanel. Shannon Swimmer, I want to bring you into the conversation. You are also a councilwoman-elect for the EBCI. I'm going to ask you the same question I just asked Chanel. Why do you think 4 women, including yourself, just elected to tribal council? And do you think the election there in Cherokee in any way mirrored any larger trends or attitudes we're seeing at the regional or national levels?
I think, like all the other women who've spoken before me have said, that people see the need for women to have a seat at the table, how important it is for our voices to be heard and for us to be, if not part of the conversation, but even leading a lot of these conversations. And as Chanel mentioned, this was the first time in a very long time that our tribal council was without a female member. And normally the female member was actually from my community, from Painttown. So I felt a really strong sense of urgency to have that voice and that perspective back on tribal council. And I think people could fill the void that was there with the absence of female voices. And I think on a larger scale, just looking at women's rights and things that are happening to women across the nation. I know we as Native women have always been aware of the different obstacles and dangers that we face, but I think now other women are starting to understand what that feels like to have your rights at stake and to feel like we need to step up and speak out and show what power we have collectively. And so I think that's what's driving a lot of that across the country. And for us in Cherokee, again, I think it was just that void that was really felt with having an all-male council and just the absence of that female perspective, that female voice,
All right.
and wanting to reclaim that.
Quick break, and we'll be right back. Continue our conversation.
The annual 2025 Indian Nations Conservation Alliance National Conference happens October 14th in Las Vegas. This 3-day gathering of tribal leaders, professionals, youth, and community members unites voices and action around conservation, innovation, and indigenous stewardship of Indian lands and resources. The Indian National Finals Rodeo will be there too. Info and registration at inca-tcd.org. Inca supports this show.
We're glad you're with us today on Native America Calling. Does a Native woman currently represent your interests in a tribal, local, state, or national office? Let us know. 1-800-996-2848. We're hearing from Native women recently chosen to serve in public office about what they hope to accomplish. We have Shelley Fayant, who is a member of Montana's House of Representatives. We have Michelle Abeyta, who is a member of the New Mexico House of Representatives, and we have Chanel Feather and Shannon Swimmer, who are both councilwomen-elect for the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians in Cherokee, North Carolina. And Shannon, I want to continue with you right now because you also have a legal background similar to Representative Abeyta from New Mexico. You were a tribal judge for several years, and your mother was also responsible for genealogical initiatives at the tribe for over 16 years. Talk more about your family's involvement in tribal government and why you decided to take a more active role now as an elected leader.
Right. So my grandfather on my mother's side, he was actually on tribal council for a term. I'm not even sure what year it was, but I do remember growing up that he and my grandmother were always really involved in the community and always, doing stuff, helping out one another. We had community gardens. They were involved in community club meetings and just always really involved and really had a sense of community and really instilled in me the importance of taking care of one another and how we have to look out for one another. And it's not just about the individual, that collectively we are stronger. And so that's always been something that's been important to me, is the community piece of it. And with being involved with the legal system, I focused a lot on our wellness court, which is a diversion court. And that also, to me, went along those same lines. It was trying to help people who were struggling with substance use disorder and trying to help them find a new community, which was a healthier community, a community that, whether they were learning the language, our arts, where they were involved in our ceremonies, something to give them a sense of belonging so that they could find healthier ways of coping with that trauma, because that's where the substance use really stems from, is from that trauma. So wanting to help people has just been a common thread throughout my whole career. And so this just really fell in line with continuing trying to find ways to help people and listening to people, hearing about what they need. And I'm a big believer in listening to people tell me what they need instead of me telling others, this is what you need, or this is what you need to do, or I have a great idea that would work. I really take my cues from the people, from the community, and try to use my skills and my abilities to help them to achieve what it is that they want to see, and bring about the change that they want to see, whether it's in their personal lives, whether it's with families, whether it's the community at large. That's been my goal throughout.
Shannon, what are the most pressing issues facing the Eastern Band of Cherokee right now, and what are you most focused on here now as a councilwoman-elect?
Housing is huge. We have such a lack of housing. There's also, I did the same thing that others have talked about, going door to door, meeting people face to face, talking to them, listening to them about what their concerns are. And over, it's the same things. It's housing, it's transparency in our government. We are a gaming tribe, and so people want to know about where the money is going, how we're going to continue to offer the level of services that we've been able to offer with the new competition that we have in the gaming area. So people are concerned about that, and we definitely want to continue to provide services for our young people, our children, our elders, and then also addressing the issue of substance use and trying to help people get back on their feet there. There are a lot of issues. There's a lot of issues, across the board, but I think that just listening to the people and adjusting what we're doing and what we're focusing on based on the needs, the changing needs. But housing, I would say, is really at the top for us right now.
Thank you, Shannon. Chanel, I want to go back to you and get your take on what the most pressing issues that you're focused on are, because I know you mentioned housing earlier, and of course, Shannon mentions just, how big the Eastern Band is with regards to its business interests and its economic development. But Chanel, we go back a few years, and I know you're also very committed to your culture. You're committed to language, you're committed to history, and I'm curious to know how you're going to address some of those cultural issues as well as a councilwoman.
Oh, yes. So my background is I grew up dancing and powwow dancing and traveling all over the United States, educating about who, Indigenous people are and powwow culture, but also who I am as a Cherokee woman. And, for me, that is the whole basis of why we are able to be who we are. And I believe that, continuing to educate our future generations to be able to instill pride in being Zalagi or Anigadua, then that is exactly how we're going to maintain our cultural identity. And it's a very, very strong one. We are so unique because we are the only federally recognized tribe in North Carolina. And we, at one point, were throughout the whole Southeast, the biggest, largest tribe. And so being able to know the history, know our unique history of how we became Eastern Band Cherokee Indian is so vitally important, especially right now. And so being able to share that with and participate with community is very, very powerful. It's changed. The beauty of that is how much it has changed in the last 30 years. We're seeing more and more younger people dancing, wearing traditional clothing, being proud about it, creating new innovative art that is culturally connected. We are seeing younger people taking pride in speaking the language and holding each other accountable to do that. And it's just amazing to be a part of that and to see that, because that's not what it was like just 30 years ago. And there were only a handful of people that were proud about doing that. And now it's like a reinsurgence, and it's coming from the young ones. We just lost another language speaker this past week. We're down to 140, less than that. And it's vital that our language is being spoken and being taught, and that it comes from leadership. So continuing to participate in ceremony, continuing to participate in culture is exactly how I want to lead, and lead through being that example.
Chanel, 4 women elected to EBCI Tribal Council. Obviously, this is historic. What I also want to ask you about, though, is the position of Principal Chief. Now, in the Eastern Band's history, one woman has served as Principal Chief. That was Joyce Dugan from 1995 to 1999. That's been more than 25 years. What are your thoughts about another Principal Chief, a woman Principal Chief for the EBCI in the future?
Oh, I think it's time. I think that in the future, there will be so many women who are able to take on that role, and I'm excited to, be in the mix right now as a councilwoman-elect, and who knows? Maybe my name will be out there one of these days. But I know that there are very highly qualified women in my community who would represent that position very, very, very well.
All right. Shannon, I'd like to get your thoughts with regard to the Principal Chief position in the future. And I also want to ask you, Shannon, at some point in the future, maybe you'll go 5 terms, maybe you'll go 6 terms, maybe you'll have more elected leadership positions within the EBCI. But at some point when you reflect back on your career, what do you want to be most remembered for among your people?
So I'll answer the first question first. And I agree with Janelle. I think that it's time for us to have another female chief or even vice chief, and I think seeing this resurgence of women leaders will encourage other young women to step up and to try throw their hat in the ring for these leadership roles. And I would love to be a mentor to those, that are coming along, and even work with those that are even older than me. And maybe they want to go for it and just want support from the younger generation. So either way, I'm there for it. I'm here for it. And then as far as what I want to be remembered for, I'm a grandmother now. And that was another reason why I decided to run for council, was because I wanted to ensure that there is still a bright future, that the tribe still has a bright future for when my granddaughter is older, and that she's able to enjoy all the same resources that we're able to enjoy right now. I want to make sure that things are sustainable, that they are still at that same level. And for me, it's never been about a title or the the prestige or anything like that. It's just been about how much I can help people. So if one person says, hey, Shannon, help me, even if I was helping them in the capacity of a council member, as an individual, as a friend, a family member, when I was a judge, as long as some person can say, she helped me when I needed it, that's all that I really need. That's all that really matters to me, is helping people. I don't need a lot of praise. I don't need, any of that, because for me, it's about the people, and I want the focus to be on them, and I want to do what's best for them.
All right, Shannon Swimmer and Chanel Feather, thank you both for joining the conversation. And I want to pivot back now to Shelley Fayant, who is a member of Montana's House of Representatives. And Representative Fayant, I imagine right now there are women listening to this show, and they're probably thinking to themselves, geez, maybe this is my time. Maybe I need to run for elected office in my community. Maybe I need to make my move. And we mentioned a research survey earlier in the show that says that almost half of those asked believe women will face gender discrimination in office. Over half believe women will have to do more than men to prove themselves as elected leaders. What do you want to tell that woman who's listening to our show right now, and they're tempted to run for office, they're tempted to take on a leadership role, but they're worried about being discriminated against? They're worried about what they're going to have to do to prove themselves.
That's a great question. I think we've all had to do that thus far anyway. And so, if you go about it with a good heart, you'll be led to do what your people need, and also to remember that you have to do the work. We know as women, we've experienced a glass ceiling, and we have to sometimes work as hard as, or twice as hard as, our male counterparts. But, I think just to follow your heart and just know that you have to do the work. And, I think one thing that we all share is that we love our people, and we want a bright future for our future generations. And sometimes that means doing the right thing, even if you're the only one standing, and you have to show that courage. But if you follow your traditional values and you have a vision, it's all worth it, no matter the sacrifices of time and, time away from your family and everything. It is worth it to serve your people and your community.
All right, State Representative Michelle Abeyta in New Mexico. Same question. What advice, what inspiration can you offer a Native woman listening to the show right now, contemplating whether or not to run for office?
I would encourage them to do it. Do it. Don't hold back. And think of our daughters, think of our children who need that voice. Think of them who need to see that role model. Think of them who need to see that fighter out there for them, making sure that the resources come home, that we're protected, that we're taken care of, that there's a voice at the table. I think Representative Fayette touched a lot on all of the great points, but don't let anything hold you back, even the cost of running for office. That was one of the huge hurdles that we had to overcome. But as long as you have your goal in sight, your heart is in it, you're doing it for the right reasons, a path will be made for you.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, so we're going to have to wrap up this conversation here on Native America Calling. I want to thank our four guests who joined the conversation today: Representative Shelley Fayant, Councilwoman-elect Chanel Feather, Councilwoman-elect Shannon Swimmer, and Representative Michelle Abeyta. We'll be back tomorrow to talk about current environmental health concerns, including opposition to the release of radioactive gas in New Mexico. I'm Sean Spruce. You've been listening to the one, the only Native America Calling. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Support provided by Amerind. Amerind is 100% tribally owned and partners with tribes and their businesses to provide affordable commercial insurance coverage, protect tribal sovereignty, and strengthen Native American communities by helping to keep dollars in Indian country. Information about property, liability, commercial auto, and workers' comp available at Amerind.com. That's AMERIND.com. This program is supported by AmeriCorps Vista. Through service with AmeriCorps Vista, you gain valuable professional experience and leadership skills while helping organizations in your community alleviate poverty. Find a service opportunity at AmeriCorps.gov/Vista today. That's AmeriCorps.gov/VISTA.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.